September 1939. Poland is burning. German panzer divisions slice through defensive positions with impunity, their steel hulls seemingly impervious to conventional firearms. British military observers watch with mounting dread as reports filter in. The future of warfare has arrived on tracks of steel, and the island nation is woefully unprepared. In the War Office in London, officers pore over intelligence reports detailing the armor thickness of German tanks, typically between 8mm and 30mm, depending on the model and location on the vehicle. The British Army needs a portable anti-tank weapon, and they need it immediately. What emerged from this crisis would become one of the most distinctive weapons of the early war years: the boy's anti-tank rifle, ungainly, punishing to fire, and ultimately limited in its effectiveness. The boy's rifle nonetheless represents an important chapter in the evolution of infantry anti-tank weapons, bridging the gap between conventional rifles and dedicated anti-tank systems. The story begins not with the crisis of 1939, but several years earlier in the mid-1930s, when the threat of armored warfare was becoming increasingly apparent to military planners. Captain Henry C. Boys of the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield had been working on the problem since 1934. A talented designer and member of the British Small Arms Committee, Boys understood that conventional rifle ammunition would be useless against even lightly armored vehicles. His solution was to scale everything up dramatically. The result was a massive rifle chambered in a purpose-designed 55 caliber 13.9mm cartridge, capable of firing a 926-grain hardened steel core bullet at approximately 2,400 feet per second. This enormous round generated approximately 10,000 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle, roughly 10 times that of a standard infantry rifle. The weapon itself was equally imposing, over 5 feet long, weighing 35 pounds unloaded, with a distinctive T-shaped butt, with a padded shoulder piece and a large muzzle brake to help tame the fearsome recoil. Originally designated as the stanchion, the rifle was renamed in honor of Captain Boys following his death in 1937, just before the weapon entered production. The timing of its introduction proved fortuitous, as the Boys entered service in 1937 when few other portable anti-tank weapons were available to infantry. The Boys rifle operated on a relatively simple bolt-action principle, featuring a bolt with a rectangular cross-section that contained dual front-locking lugs. It fed from a 5-round detachable box magazine inserted from the top, and featured a bipod attached near the front of the barrel to support its considerable weight during firing. One of its most distinctive features was the circular muzzle brake, which helped reduce the substantial recoil, though reduce is a relative term. Veterans who fired the Boys in combat described the experience in vivid, often painful terms. "Like being kicked by a mule," recalled one British soldier. "After 3 shots, you'd have a bruise the size of a dinner plate on your shoulder," remembered another. The heavy recoil was partly mitigated by the weapon's weight and the rubber padding on the shoulder piece. But there was no escaping the physics of firing such a powerful cartridge from a shoulder weapon. Despite these drawbacks, the Boys represented the best portable anti-tank option available to British and Commonwealth forces in the early years of World War II. When war broke out in September 1939, the Boys rifle was rushed to frontline units at a rate of approximately 1,000 per month from the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield. Standard issue was 1 per infantry platoon, where it would be operated by a 2-man team, a gunner, and an ammunition bearer. The weapon was also mounted on some early war vehicles like the Universal Carrier, commonly known as the Bren gun carrier, to provide mobile anti-tank capability. Initial combat reports from France during the phony war period of 1939-1940 were cautiously optimistic. Against lightly armored vehicles and reconnaissance cars, The boys proved reasonably effective at ranges up to 300 yards. With proper shot placement at the thinner rear or side armor, even some light tanks could be neutralized. The round could penetrate approximately 20 to 23 millimeters of armor at 100 yards, sufficient for many of the German tanks in the earliest stages of the conflict. May 1940. The German Blitzkrieg crashes through the Low Countries and into France. British Expeditionary Force soldiers crouch in hastily prepared positions, boys' rifles at the ready as Panzer IIIs and IVs rumble toward their lines. Lance Corporal Thomas Jenkins of the 4th Battalion, Royal Tank Regiment, later recalled, "We had been told the boys would punch through German armor, but when I fired at a Panzer from about 150 yards, the rounds just sparked off the frontal armor. Frightening moment that, realizing you've got nothing that can stop these machines." As German tanks evolved with the Panzer III and I-4, featuring armor up to 50 mm thick by 1940, the limitations of the boys' rifle became painfully apparent. During the desperate evacuation from Dunkirk, many of the cumbersome anti-tank rifles were abandoned as troops prioritized mobility in their race to the beaches. Though production continued, the weapon's effectiveness was clearly diminishing against improving German armor. Despite its declining effectiveness against frontline tanks, the boys' rifle found continued utility in various theaters and specialized roles throughout the early war years. In North Africa, where Italian tanks were often more lightly armored than their German counterparts, the boys remained viable for longer. During the siege of Tobruk in 1941, Australian defenders used boys' rifles to good effect against Italian M1340 tanks, which had a maximum armor thickness of just 30 mm. Lieutenant James Rutherford of the 217th Australian Infantry Battalion recounted, "We'd wait until they were within 100 yards, then aim for the side panels or engine compartment. Get a good hit there, and they'd brew up nicely." The weapon also proved useful against enemy bunkers, machine gun nests, and other hardened positions where its tremendous penetrating power could punch through materials that would stop standard rifle bullets. In the Pacific Theater, U.S. Marine Corps units employed the boys against Japanese tanks, which were generally more lightly armored than European designs. The Marines particularly valued it for use against pillboxes and other fortified positions during island-hopping campaigns. Technical improvements were attempted to extend the boys' rifle's service life. The most significant came in 1942 when the MCO second variant was introduced with a shorter barrel, 36 inches compared to the original 40 inches, and improved round with a tungsten carbide core rather than hardened steel. This W Mark II ammunition boosted penetration by approximately 16%, potentially allowing it to defeat up to 26 mm of armor at 100 yards. However, tungsten was a critical strategic material needed for machine tools and other industrial applications, limiting the production of this enhanced ammunition. By this point, the boys was increasingly being supplemented by more effective weapons like the Piat, projector infantry anti-tank in British service, and various bazooka-type rocket launchers in American units. Yet production of the boys continued until 1943, with a total of approximately 62,000 manufactured. One of the most interesting chapters in the boys' rifles' history came from an unexpected quarter. The Finnish army during the continuation war against the Soviet Union. Finland purchased approximately 1,800 boys' rifles from the United Kingdom and employed them in a specialized role against Soviet tanks. Finnish soldiers developed distinctive tactics, aiming not at the heavily armored hulls, but at tracks, road wheels, and vision slits to immobilize or blind enemy vehicles. Some Finnish units even experimented with an explosive round developed for the weapon. A particularly innovative application involved mounting the boy's rifle on light skis or small sleds during winter operations, allowing mobile anti-tank teams to strike Soviet armor and quickly withdraw across snow-covered terrain where the heavy tanks couldn't follow. This adaptive use of a weapon approaching obsolescence demonstrates how creative tactical employment could sometimes overcome technical limitations. Beyond its intended anti-armor role, the boys found use in other specialized applications. The Royal Air Force mounted them on Blenheim light bombers for ground attack missions against German vehicles in North Africa. Special Forces units like the Long Range Desert Group and SAS valued the boys for its ability to disable aircraft on the ground by puncturing engines and fuel tanks. Most significantly, the weapon formed the basis for several specialized sniper rifles. The most famous was likely the rifle anti-tank 55-5 Boys Elephant gun, used by renowned Canadian sniper Corporal Francis Pegamagabo, who reportedly made confirmed kills at ranges over 1,000 yards. These conversions typically involved improving the sights, modifying the stock for more comfortable extended use, and sometimes adding a suppressor, though exceptionally unwieldy for traditional sniping. The immense power and range of the 55 Boys cartridge made these conversions effective against targets that would be invulnerable to standard sniper rifles. By late 1943, the Boys anti-tank rifle had been largely relegated to secondary roles in most Allied armies. The introduction of tanks with armor 80 mm thick or greater had rendered it essentially useless in its primary function. German Tigers and Panthers, with frontal armor exceeding 100 mm, were completely impervious to the Boys. Even earlier models had been upgraded with additional armor that outclassed the British weapons' capabilities. The development of shaped-charge warheads like those used in the American bazooka and British Piat provided infantry with weapons that could defeat even heavy armor through chemical energy rather than kinetic penetration. Yet the Boys rifle continued to serve in rear areas, colonial garrisons, and home guard units until the end of the war. Its gradual obsolescence illustrates a pattern common in military technology. A weapon designed to counter a specific threat often faces a limited effective lifespan as adversaries adapt and improve their equipment. Looking back from our modern perspective, the Boys anti-tank rifle represents an important transitional technology in the ever-evolving contest between infantry and armor. Its development reflected the understanding that conventional small arms were ineffective against even the lightest armor, while its rapid obsolescence demonstrated how quickly tank technology advanced during World War II. The Boys occupied a brief historical window between the era when standard rifles might threaten early tanks and the development of true man-portable anti-tank weapons like shape-charge rockets and missiles. Though ultimately unsuccessful in its primary role, the Boys rifle nonetheless served when few alternatives existed, giving infantry at least some chance against the armored behemoths transforming the battlefield. The lessons learned from its limitations directly influenced the development of more effective infantry anti-tank weapons that followed. In the story of the Boys anti-tank rifle, we find a reminder that military technology rarely evolves in isolation, but rather through an ongoing process of measure and countermeasure, with each innovation spurring adaptations that eventually render it obsolete. The unwieldy elephant gun that British soldiers cursed for its brutal recoil represents just one chapter in this eternal technological contest. A chapter that helped bridge the gap between the battlefields of the past and the anti-tank systems that would follow.